He acknowledged to her that he could never win against Senpai, no matter what. Kureha, drinking from her can, turned to Takashi and asked, "Hey, Takashi-kun." With a smile, she reminded him that since he had finally turned 20 that day, Takashi found himself stunned, his heart racing at the thought that his girlfriend became so bold when she drank. But the rule was drinking and living together started after turning 20. He wondered aloud in confusion and thought again that he couldn't tell whether she was being serious or just joking. At that moment, he was once again being toyed around by her. While she cried out "whey," he quickly suggested switching to juice instead of alcohol. Grabbing a glass and showing it to her, he reminded her that they had her favorite juice. Takashi Suzuki, a college student, noted that it had almost been a year since he started dating Kureha Senpai from the same club. With determined seriousness and clenched fists, Kureha asked which was more important to him, living together or alcohol. He tried to deflect, saying they were still just kids. Takashi with a stunned face while Kureha Otani stood with her hand on her chest and yelled that she was 21 and he had turned 20 that day. She reminded him that they were both adults now. Kureha Otani, brightening instantly, said that with that settled they could live together, to which Takashi responded that her way of thinking was still pretty childish. She gladly repeated, "Yay, no more problems." He thought to himself that living together wasn't just one of her usual jokes. Kureha Otani asked with a tease if he was saying it was her fault because she was drunk, while Takashi in his mind said, "But still." He reminded Kureha to begin with, asking if her parents even allowed that. In his mind, Takashi screamed that they hadn't even kissed yet. Takashi asked if her family was really okay with it, to which Kureha replied that it was fine. She nonchalantly explained that she had already told them she might live with her boyfriend once he turned 20. Takashi thought he needed to do something about this drunk girl fast, standing and walking away while Kureha watched him go. With a sad and worried expression, she looked down holding a can of juice and gently asked if he hated her now. He was immediately stunned, clutching his chest and blushing. He then said that if he truly hated her, he wouldn't be playing along with her jokes. She smiled brightly and joyfully replied that was the guy she believed in. Internally, he acknowledged that Kureha Senpai. He thought that she drank too much and always acted spoiled around him, her junior. But she never let her guard down around others. Yet in private, she sent messages saying she was lonely, insisting over and over that she wanted to see him. Takashi Suzuki noted that her mood switched back and forth so easily. He really loved that kind of senpai. While smiling, she drank from a can. Senpai, with a serious yet slightly embarrassed face, checked her phone. She read the conversation again and told herself that the discussion had started from there. However, she reminded herself to double-check with his family first. She had then called her mother and said hi, asking if she had a minute and mentioning the topic from earlier about living together. Takashi, in disbelief, thought that she really did call about it. Senpai then turned to him. Takashi stammered a quick yes, now deeply flustered. Senpai explained that her mom said she had something she wanted to say at the end. Then Takashi Suzuki introduced himself and said that he had taken over the call. His face was shown tense and sweating. He told Senpai's mother that he had been dating Kureha for about 2 years now. Her mother politely asked him to take good care of Kureha. The call ended, and he looked stunned and devastated. A tense silence briefly filled the room, heightened further by awkwardness. Sentai had then informed him with a bright smile that starting tomorrow they would be living together. Takashi, still flustered and nervous, had argued that no matter how he looked at it, it was way too sudden and had questioned how it made any sense. The senpai, looking away slightly embarrassed, yet sincere, explained that it was because she wanted to be with him more. Takashi's face turned bright red, eyes wide and mouth agape, and she teased him, touching his face and saying he was cute when he blushed. He insisted that it was because she was sulking first, to which she replied seriously that she was being totally sincere about everything she had said. As she crawled closer to him on all fours, the senpai, her expression turning slightly vulnerable yet earnest, looked him directly in the eyes and asked if he didn't want to live together with her. Kureha Otani's eyes sparkled with hope and anticipation, silently begging for the answer she desired. Takashi Suzuki grew highly flustered and confused hesitating to respond while blushing. The tension was overwhelming. He admitted to himself that he was totally weak to those eyes. Feeling tense and flustered, he struggled, saying, "Tch," then began to apologize. He started to say something, but stopped. Then, with trembling hands, wiped the sweat off his face and said it wasn't that he didn't want to live with her. He was just confused because of everything. Kureha Otani, while grabbing a blanket, confessed, blushing, that even though she knew it was too early for thoughts about graduation or jobs, she couldn't help but dream of spending time with him. But then he wondered how serious Senpai really was about it all. She explained that she had actually thought it through pretty carefully, but admitted that maybe she should have discussed it with him first. Takashi nodded and added that he would have liked a heads up to prepare himself. Suddenly, Takashi Suzuki's expression shifted to one of surprise, as if he had just remembered something important. Kureha Otani had smiled brightly and said she would help him out. Takashi Suzuki had seemed flustered and said there was still a lot he needed to take care of and awkwardly tried to explain further. Takashi repeated his request for her not to help him and wondered why that was. She quietly said really to his face, while Takashi, in his own mind, repeated once more that he didn't want her helping him. He begged inwardly for her not to realize it. Suddenly, she had a light bulb moment. Kureha enthusiastically reassured the embarrassed Takashi, who had his face in his hands, that no matter how weird his books were, she wouldn't be disgusted. With a close-up shot of two open magazines, one showing a woman in a bikini on the cover. The girl had calmly picked up one of the magazines and read its cover saying, "Special Boob Edition OK," with a neutral face, as though nothing was odd. She moved to another one, reading its cover, and commented flatly, "Dark Skin Girl Special, nope," before tossing it aside. Upon seeing the Heavenly Thighs edition, she simply remarked, "Well, I guess it's fine," her voice and expression serious, but relaxed. After finishing her inspection, she had told him, "All right, I guess that's everything," while the boy sat anxiously on the floor with a defeated look, his thoughts echoing in exasperation that he had hid those so carefully. With a mischievous smile, Kureha Otani leaned close to Takashi and teased him, asking if he really wanted to do naughty things with her that badly. She struck a coy pose, hearts floating around her, as she asked if those weren't the exact areas his eyes always wandered to. Takashi was stunned, his face red as he demanded what the heck she was even talking about. Kureha explained it was because of his usual behavior, and he stammered in return, admitting without thinking that his attention did get drawn to her chest and thighs. Horrified afterward, he wondered what he had just said. Internally, he admitted that it was true his gaze tended to wander in that way, but he thought that was a totally different issue. And when Kureha pressed him, asking if that's why he had used the magazines to imagine they were her to comfort himself, he replied with a tense voice that he had no comment. She said that if he answered properly, maybe she would do the things in that book for him someday. With an unimpressed expression, Kureha confirmed that he had confessed. He asked whether she was angry, and she said, "Now about the ones that were left." Quietly, he breathed a sigh of relief, thinking, "Phew." Then, with a smiling face, Kureha told him to go burn them now on the stove. Shocked, he gasped and asked what she had just said. Without smiling, she repeated that he should burn all the books that didn't resemble her, looking increasingly serious. In the end, his stash of lewd books was cut in half as a sacrifice. He thanked her, and she smiled brightly, she telling him happy birthday again. However, Takashi thought to himself with a heavy heart, wondering if this was his punishment for being satisfied with lewd magazines, even though he had a senpai like her. He sighed, telling himself that she had always managed to dodge that kind of comment until now. He wondered if, in the end, she just liked teasing him. She then turned to Takashi, addressing him directly, and asked why he didn't try drinking as well, while smiling and holding two cans. Takashi thought to himself, if only he had the courage to ask her directly. She then pulled out a can and said that they would start with carbonated sour, explaining that she had bought something that even beginners could drink. Takashi tense thought that at this point, he had no choice but to get hyped with alcohol and asked her to go easy on him. They clinked glasses together and Kureha Otani explained that it was low in alcohol, very sweet, and easy to drink, making it perfect for his first time. Takashi Suzuki thanked her and appeared friendly and upbeat. He took a sip, feeling a sweet and tangy flavor spread in his mouth, followed by a faint sense of discomfort. He said it kind of tasted like soda, and Kureha explained that it was basically just soda turned into alcohol. Takashi thought it was not as bad as he expected. Kureha turned to him and said she was actually starting to feel pumped. Kureha then presented a can of refreshing plum wine, saying it was a classic drink that anyone had to try at least once, so its taste was worth remembering. Takashi sipped from it, saying it tasted kind of like grated plum juice and was actually pretty good. Takashi described how the intense scent of plum hit the nose directly and the umami spread across the tongue. He savored the drink, feeling as if he were truly tasting the plum itself, its flavors rich and authentic. However, he reminded himself that what he was drinking was undeniably alcohol. There was a sharp sting deep in his throat, a sensation he couldn't ignore. Kureha interrupted again, unveiling the final can with excitement. The cheerful girl, smiling with excitement, had insisted they at least try the hyper beer that night, popping open a can. Takashi Suzuki grabbed the can and quickly chugged it back, tilting his head with a focused, determined look. He downed the drink. After finishing the chug, he lowered the can, gasped for breath, and looked overwhelmed with a blushing face. Kureha clapped and praised his chug while he held the can and thought about the umami that lingered in his throat. He realized he might get hooked on this. Takashi Suzuki suddenly became flustered and dizzy, his face breaking into a sweat with spirals in his eyes. He thought it was strange that everyone else looked fine, even when drinking a glass in one go. Meanwhile, the senpai's voice sounded, saying that maybe soon he would be able to drink outside too. He responded weakly. She asked with a tense face if she looked really wobbly, and he admitted he seemed really drunk. She sat there stunned, and he repeated with a raised face that he wasn't drunk with an exaggerated expression. She commented that people who said that were usually drunk. Then, with a serious face, she told him to wait a moment, saying she would go grab some water. But as she stood up, he grabbed her arm. Takashi Suzuki asked Kureha Otani softly, with his face lowered, whether she really liked him senpai. When Takashi questioned if this was really happening, or if it was all some sort of prank, Kureha smiled warmly and reassured him that she was seriously in love with him and had always only loved him. The boy with his face pressed against her chest asked for a kiss. Takashi to himself thought, with embarrassment, that he really had said it. Kureha had softly replied teasingly, asking if he wanted to. Takashi asked Kureha if she felt the same way he did, and deep inside he thought that he wanted to kiss her, the girl he truly liked. Kureha, blushingly, admitted softly that she did feel the same way too. However, she added that perhaps now wasn't the right moment. She explained that she didn't want to give away something important while she was drunk. Takashi then tentatively responded. She then gently asked if he could wait until the morning for their kiss. They were sitting extremely close, both blushing, and Kureha had the drink cup between them when she had asked him this. Ryota and Kureha remained close, and he fell asleep on her lap. To which he softly said, "Okay, that was how her 20th birthday had come to an end." The next morning dawned softly, the apartment bathed in gentle light as birds chirped outside, ushering in a new day. The next morning, Takashi Suzuki woke with a severe hangover, thinking his head hurt so much he lay there groaning. He blurrily recalled drinking all the alcohol they had, but couldn't quite remember what they had talked about afterward, or even how he'd gotten to bed. Confusion and unease rippled through him as he wondered when he had fallen asleep. Suddenly, he smelled something familiar and froze. In a tense moment, he peeked out of the room, thoughts racing as he sniffed, trying to place the scent. He asked what she was doing, and she replied that she was making breakfast, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Takashi Suzuki asked in surprise if Kureha Otani hadn't gone home, and she replied that miso soup the morning after drinking was on another level, and there was no way she could leave him alone and go home. A blush colored Kureha's face as she whispered that she had made a promise. When he repeated the word promise, she quickly brushed it off, saying it was nothing, just talking to herself. Kureha then pointed out his bedhead hair, which she said was a total mess, and suggested he go wash his face. Takashi responded that he would fix it at lightning speed, and she thought how cute he looked when he panicked. Later, Takashi was seen standing in front of the bathroom mirror, combing his hair, still wondering if he could really become someone worthy of Kureha. He wondered whether he could really become a man worthy of Kureha Senpai. He shook his head vigorously in front of the bathroom mirror, trying to rid himself of that line of thought, and internally screamed to himself, "No, no, no." In a tearful face, he grabbed his head and wondered how long he was going to stay so weak. Looking back at the mirror, he told himself to get it together, reminding himself that if he didn't, then that was right. He must toughen up. They gathered around the breakfast table with plates of fried eggs, salad, cherry tomatoes, bowls of soup, rice, and glasses of water, all neatly arranged. Before eating, he thanked her for the food. Think with sure, dark hair began eating and sipped his soup. Blushing with satisfaction, Takashi admitted it was delicious, thinking to himself that the flavors were deeply absorbed. Kureha Otani responded eagerly. The conversation then shifted as Takashi brought up a previously mentioned promise. With a blushing, nervous face, tense and gripping his chopsticks, Kureha said that first of all, she was sorry and confessed that she thought she liked to tease and make him uncomfortable. He reacted with a startled, "Eh." She said that yesterday when he was drunk, he had told her something. He started to respond, wondering in his mind what he had done yesterday and what he had said to Kureha while drunk. While she was still smiling, she finished the story, saying that he had said he probably wouldn't be able to stop teasing her from then on either. Looking down with a sad and vulnerable expression, tears began to form in Kureha's eyes as she confessed her deeper feelings and fears. She admitted that she loved him from the bottom of her heart, which was why she had been afraid to offer her body. She added that she was scared he would end up hating her or thinking she was a slut. He repeated that there was no way he would think that. She said so it was true. He wasn't the kind of guy who would do that. Takashi Suzuki, with a serious expression, had said Kureha Otani was holding back a lot of things and never let him notice it all this time, calling her senpai and thinking what he should do, saying she was just so irresistibly lovable. With a teasing and slightly seductive tone, Kureha Otani had asked if they should do it, saying that at that rate, she was going to lose control. She half-kneeled on her seat and leaned forward with a blushing face, while Takashi Suzuki, with a blushing and panicked face, asked, "Do what?" She explained that she had held back and cleaned, but the room was still dirty. Kureha then leaned forward over the table, looking up at him with an affectionate, mischievous smile. The mood had become playful and flirtatious. She said, "A kiss." She leaned close to him, pressing her face near his with bold confidence. Takashi, overwhelmed by the mere notion of an indirect kiss, asked if, in the end, she was stopping just short. She replied firmly that she wouldn't, and he tensed as she reminded him that a direct kiss would be mouth to mouth instead of nose to nose. She touched his lips with her finger, sending shivers through him. Turning serious, she asked if the questions were over now. When he nodded, she smiled and said, "All right then," hushing him with a shh. He begged her not to scare him anymore, his heart pounding, while Eri remained close, smiling sweetly. Kureha Otani smiled softly, her face blushing with anticipation. Then Kureha Otani leaned in and kissed Takashi Suzuki, saying that since it was his first time, she would be gentle with him. He thought that their long-awaited first kiss had, in fact, tasted faintly of miso soup. Their lips separated slowly, and Takashi thought that that was what felt right to him. Kureha, blushing, said that as she thought, she really couldn't beat him. At that moment, he finally realized that this was what felt right to him. The scene shifted to a city street, with mostly sky and urban buildings visible. She was then shown standing in the street, joyfully exclaiming with both hands to her face, blushing intensely, "I finally did it." As she walked alone down a city sidewalk that evening, hands on her cheeks still blushing and thoughtful, she reflected that all this time, she didn't want to be seen as a slut, so she had kept holding back from kissing. Thinking that way, Kureha convinced herself that maybe relying on alcohol wasn't such a bad thing. After all, it was only because of the alcohol that she had been able to kiss him. As she walked with her hands over her mouth, two guys nearby glanced at her, and one remarked that she was super cute. She overheard their comments, making her tense up for a moment. But she steeled herself with the thought that other guys didn't matter at all. The one she liked was someone serious but who sometimes showed a cute side, only him. She remembered that 2 years ago, during the club's welcome party, Takashi had been sitting alone. Ever since that day, without looking back, she thought firmly that other guys didn't matter to her at all. The one she liked was someone serious, who sometimes showed a cute side, and that was only him. She murmured to herself, longing to live with Takashi-kun soon. It seems that even Senpai wasn't as composed as she seemed. It had been several days since the idea of living together with Kureha had come up. Takashi had received messages from Kureha saying she was coming over to hang out again that day, including a note that she was on the 3rd floor. Takashi was vacuuming the living room, thinking back on everything. He wondered at one point what had happened with the living together thing anyway, feeling as if things had begun to blur as each day passed. Even when he asked Kureha about it, she somehow always diverted the conversation. Just then, the doorbell rang. Kureha's voice came from outside, calling his name and asking him to unlock the door. Takashi said okay, but wondered to himself why she didn't use the spare key he had given her. Smiling warmly, Senpai said that she had actually wanted him to open the door for her that day, and that was what she had been thinking. Takashi-kun, stunned, looked at Senpai now standing in his apartment with a suitcase. He tried to process the scene and asked her what the suitcase was for. Senpai cheerfully explained that it was the full set for living together in his room, even mentioning tableware. Takashi-kun shouted in surprise, asking if it was starting that very day. While thinking to himself that Senpai always did whatever she wanted, his thoughts drifted back to their earlier kiss, making his face heat up with a blush. Even that kiss flashed through his mind as evidence of her boldness and unpredictability. He thought that he still couldn't believe they would actually be living together, even as Senpai dragged her suitcase into the apartment, saying, "Excuse me," with a smile. Senpai and Takashi-kun stood facing each other in the apartment. Takashi-kun, sounding apologetic, told her that he hadn't been mentally prepared at all and asked her to at least inform him a day in advance if something like this was going to happen. With a soft smile, Senpai teased him and asked if he had really been feeling anxious the whole time. Takashi-kun stammered a denial, but Senpai told him not to hide it. Turning serious, she admitted that the reason she hadn't said anything until that day was because she didn't have the courage. Takashi-kun repeated the word courage, still confused. Senpai's face turned serious and a bit sad as she blushed. Takashi thought everything about her face right then was adorable. She confessed that she was a girl too, and said that once they started living together, she didn't want him to see her weird side and end up hating her. With a deeply moved expression, Takashi became aware of how much his heart was aching. He thought to himself how cute she was, then he called out her name. Even that day, he admitted to himself he was puzzled by her always shifting emotions. Deep down, he felt he had to try his best too, so that Senpai wouldn't get tired of him. Takashi-kun remembered the letter Senpai's mother had written. In it, she acknowledged that her daughter might be selfish, but pleaded with Takashi-kun to spend his future with her. The note was signed Mother with a heart. He thought to himself that he could really feel the pressure. Takashi sat with his head lowered, drenched in sweat as Kureha stood beside him. He thought to himself that he could really feel the pressure. Senpai then brightened up, bringing her hands together and saying, "All right," with a big smile. Suddenly, she snapped to a sitting position. She had then suggested they drink sake. While Takashi thought she had returned to her usual lazy self, he asked whether it was not changing the atmosphere too quickly. But his face turned red as he thought that that day she had matched the lipstick with her outfit. While she drank, he focused on her lips, thinking about her lipstick. She noticed him staring and asked why, then casually asked him if he didn't like being looked at, adding jokingly that with such an intense stare, anyone would notice. Takashi blushed furiously, thinking about her words. She leaned in closer, her expression turning teasing as she accused him of watching and called him a pervert. He blushed and sweated profusely, visibly flustered by her words. Stammering, he apologized, but told him with a smile that she loved the honest Takashi most of all. Changing the topic, she asked what he wanted to drink, saying she had brought both sweet and bitter ones. He replied that he would go with the sweet one, and she said she would take a sweet one too. Then facing each other and holding their cans, she proposed a toast to their cohabitation. Kureha then took a close-up sip, savoring it fully. Afterward, she sat back with a slightly flushed face and visibly relaxed, the sparkling drink still in hand. Placing the can down, she declared that the alcohol was starting to hit just right. He was stunned, then spat out his drink as Kureha leaned forward mischievously, suggesting they go ahead and give him the sweet kiss he wanted. She held his shoulder and smiled playfully. Takashi, stunned and blushing while coughing, asked if he had ever asked for something like that. Kureha reminded him that he had picked the sweet drink. Then she leaned in closer, her face almost touching his, and asked if he hadn't been in the mood, saying that was kind of sad. Takashi blushed and thought that he hadn't chosen the drink with that kind of intent, but inwardly admitted he had been mentally prepared ever since they toasted. Takashi felt tense. They both sat together on the couch. She leaned in close and licked his ear. Takashi admitted that his ears were ticklish, and she playfully said that his ears being sensitive was cute. Takashi pointed out that she was teasing him again. She responded, smiling, that she loved all his cute reactions and just couldn't help wanting to tease him. Then she suddenly slipped off the couch with a thud, saying, "Whoa." Kureha sat up and looked at him with a playful taunt, asking what it was now, and noticing that his face had gotten even redder. With a strangled cry, Takashi stared at her, showing a mix of pain and embarrassment. Internally, he thought that he was being utterly and thoroughly teased. Kureha grabbed a drink can, opened it, and told him that there was no turning away, for otherwise they couldn't have a sweet kiss, repeating the phrase from before, which made him groan. They sat together on the couch, and the girl patted his head, saying he did well. He told her that next time she should be more careful. Inwardly, he wondered if that was what a sweet kiss was. Kureha, still smiling, replied that it was just an indirect kiss. She added with a serious look that she had held back, gently sliding a box of snacks. She warned playfully that she might not be able to hold back next time. Turning to him, she licked her lips with a focused and intense face. She then pulled out a box of chocolate sticks, smiling mischievously as she introduced a new game. Sitting on the couch with a chocolate stick between her lips, she said she would bite the chocolate end and wait, instructing Takashi to nibble it slowly. Takashi Suzuki told himself that if he just sat there and did nothing, she would end up controlling the whole situation again. He resolved not to let things go her way as always, and taking the stick between his teeth with a firm expression. With tense hearts, Takashi and Kureha both bit the chocolate stick at opposite ends, moving closer to each other. Kureha smiled softly, encouraging him, saying he was doing great, and told him to come closer while giggling. His face was flushed red. They leaned into each other on the couch, still chewing the stick, and their hands touched, adding to the mounting romantic tension. At one point, their mouths were almost touching. Takashi said maybe that was enough, but Kureha seemed confused and kept moving closer. Takashi, stunned and blushing, let out a muffled sound as she kissed him. Kureha Otani then gently pressed her lips against his, and Takashi Suzuki tensed, both their faces flushed and sweaty. Kureha smiled and asked if he was ready to continue. Sitting on the couch, blushing and touching his lips, as Kureha straddled his lap with her back to the reader, he stuttered and asked what that was. Kureha, smiling, said it was a sweet kiss and asked if it had tasted sweet. He looked very surprised, distressed, and blushing. He was sweating with wide eyes and yelled, asking if they were still doing this. Kureha said that, of course, they were. Right then, she added that this time he would be on the chocolate side, calling him Takashi. She sat on his lap, holding him by the shoulders and looking intense, but playful. She reminded him that she had told him she wouldn't hold back until she was satisfied. She was going to give him lots of sweet kisses. The room was filled with tense anticipation as soft moans and crunching noises echoed through the air. Takashi found himself enduring a kiss, his face slick with sweat and his body tense. Kureha there was tense and blushing, thinking that maybe she should add a bit more sweetness. To do this, she dipped the stick into the peach-flavored alcoholic drink, then lifted it and let it drip to her mouth, saying here. Holding the snack in her mouth with a blushing face, she asked if they should go again. He reacted awkwardly and scared. While hugging her, Takashi said she was truly a sneaky person. Kureha called his name and made hot noises until Takashi called out to Kureha, saying "Senpai," repeatedly, trying to snap her back to reality. She responded with a tense face, and he quickly told her to calm down for a moment, noting she was acting weirdly drunk. He then removed the can from her hand and told her he was confiscating her alcohol. Kureha said she wanted to melt together with him. Then Kureha Otani asked in a soft voice whether he would make up for what she was missing. Takashi, blushing, asked unsurely if she meant him, and Kureha, with a deep sigh, said that even without the sake she would still be satisfied. She asked if he would give her a deep kiss. Takashi, blushing, with a clenched jaw, answered that he would. Takashi then immediately pulled Kureha onto his lap, making her gasp in surprised embarrassment. Taking her face in his hand, he told her calmly that he would make sure to satisfy her. As he leaned in closer, Kureha's blushing face showed her nervousness and excitement. She uttered his name, and Takashi then embraced her tightly as Kureha blushed deeply and looked away with a shy expression, telling Takashi not to tease her like that. He said he would continue, then pulling Kureha's face towards him, they kissed again. Tears of joy streaming down her face, Kureha said she really loved Takashi. She called his name, and then they shared a kiss. Afterward, she blushed and smiled, saying she really loved him too. Senpai. Takashi, red-faced and teary, thought she was so cute. Sitting together afterward, Kureha still resting on his lap, blushing intense, Kureha accused Takashi of being mean. She admitted she had expected him to be more aggressive. Takashi, also red, replied that she always teased him too, saying that made them even. He looked at her and told her sincerely that when she looked so happy, he just couldn't help it. He said that to him, she was the one. Matching her gaze, Kureha hesitated, saying, "Well, that's because." Kureha, looking up at Takashi with adoration and trust, softly held his hand. Takashi gazed back affectionately. She told him that if it was him, she would be happy, no matter what he did to her. His expression turned serious, then silently determined as he made up his mind. He squeezed her hand gently and reached out. Suddenly, Takashi kissed Kureha, catching her off guard and leaving her wide-eyed in shock and excitement. While still kissing, Takashi softly reminded Kureha that he had told her he would make her satisfied, and she continued making affectionate sounds. In her mind, Kureha kept repeating that she loved Takashi, saying that even just a kiss was a huge step for her. Kureha, with a flushed face and tears streaming down, was panting heavily. She thought that if things continued, she wouldn't be able to hold herself back. While wiping away her sweat, she smiled and decided to stop there, suggesting that they should end with just kissing for now. Suddenly, her face shifted, and she remarked that if Takashi Suzuki was truly feeling that way, Takashi Suzuki appeared and asked what was going on. She then pulled Takashi towards hers and kissed him. She thought that even she had been holding back, no matter how much Takashi Suzuki wanted to. He reaffirmed to himself that their relationship would only ever go as far as a kiss, even if Senpai was the one asking for more. A wall clock ticked in a quiet, empty room, marking the silent passage of time after an eventful night. Kureha, sitting on the couch, complained with embarrassment that her mouth was all sticky. Takashi, appearing nonchalant, replied that playing stick games all day led to such consequences. Afterward, sitting together on the couch, Kureha Otani had suggested skipping university classes that day. They talked about whether their attendance numbers were okay, saying they usually attended class seriously. Kureha smiled and said that skipping just that day should be fine. Takashi thought that it was the first time he had ever skipped class. It didn't feel bad or anything, but with a glance at her, he thought that, to be honest, it was the opposite. He said "senpai" and thought that he could say things now that he usually couldn't. Then, from the same position, she casually asked if he wanted to sleep together in the bed while he was staying there anyway. Takashi blushed with a serious face. Kureha then smiled softly at him. They continued talking and laughing as Kureha, with a flushed face, averted her eyes and said that her suggestion wasn't a naughty invitation. Takashi replied that he was just joking. She then said, "Let's be together soon," with a sweet smile. Takashi thought that no matter how hard he tried, he always lost to Kureha, but that was what made him happy. The scene shifted to a close-up of neatly folded towels on a shelf, establishing the setting as a bathroom or shower room and providing a calm atmosphere. Meanwhile, a silhouette of Kureha Otani could be seen through frosted glass as she prepared for a shower. She had almost been swept away by Takashi, she thought, appearing with her back to the curtain. She thought to herself that she had almost gotten swept away by Takashi as she braced herself with a tense face, thinking that alone time really was necessary. Otherwise, she might end up wanting more than just a kiss. However, she struggled with the fact that she didn't want to be away from Takashi at all. She didn't even feel like going to college. Sitting there, she reflected that lately she had been thinking about Takashi all the time. She wondered if that was selfish too, but then concluded with determination that it couldn't be helped after all. She had already fallen for him. Stepping out of the bathroom, she resolved that she had to make sure she didn't show any weaknesses. Blushing, but Kureha Otani finally stood up and grabbed a towel. She acknowledged to herself that when she was with the person she loved, she wanted to be a different version of herself than usual. After finishing her cleaning, Kureha breathed a sigh of relief and wiped her forehead, saying that the cleaning was all done. Later, it showed Takashi tense, entering a room. He thought that it was the third day since Kureha had come over, and admitted that even though he had slept in till noon the previous day, in his thoughts he remembered that she had kept teasing him so much he couldn't get anything done. There was a flashback to Kureha panicking that at that rate he would find out wearing her special lingerie. As she glanced at the clock, she was stunned to realize how late it was. Kureha thought she still had to make up for the classes she had skipped and couldn't believe she had ended up skipping 3 whole days. At the door, Kureha Otani reminded him that his friend had covered for him during that time, to which Takashi Suzuki replied that it was true. They both stood in silence awkwardly. Takashi then thought with a tense expression that if it was that girl covering for him, she would definitely dig into what he was doing. The next day at school, he was greeted with a shout calling him a slacker for finally showing up. In a lecture hall, a girl with long hair said that thanks to him, her plans were ruined. She complained that since she had covered for him again, she thought he would at least treat her to some barbecue. He replied that her appetite was no joke. That girl was Yu Sonoda, his only and best friend. Yu turned to Takashi Suzuki and asked in a light yet pointed tone why he had skipped for 3 days. She warned that depending on his excuse, he might have to treat her to a lot of dessert for her forgiveness. Takashi Suzuki thought to himself that although she was a girl, hanging out with her was pretty much like being with one of the guys. The hooded student said that if Takashi Suzuki didn't fess up, it would be forced barbecue. Takashi Suzuki replied that it didn't really feel like being forgiven. The hooded student insisted again, and Takashi Suzuki finally gave in, saying he would tell him. With his eyes closed and a slightly embarrassed smile, Takashi Suzuki admitted that he had skipped class because he wanted to cuddle with Senpai. She explained she had said it depended on the reason, and clarified she was just a cover, while he flirted with his girlfriend. Takashi admitted he was being honest. She kept up the pressure while he apologized. After that, Yu switched to an angry and curious demeanor and demanded an explanation. Takashi nervously said that he hadn't really had a choice. Kureha Senpai had suddenly appeared with her bags and announced she was moving in with him. Yu reacted with stunned confusion and asked what he meant by living together and about her bringing her stuff. Takashi bluntly repeated that, just like he had said, he was currently living with Senpai. She got tense and blurted out that he had never told her that. Takashi replied honestly that he hadn't told her because, and broke off there. She followed this up with a teasing jab, reminding him that they had always been the one getting bossed around, and nudged them with her elbow. Takashi, blushing, denied it, insisting it wasn't like that. Yu turned away with a soft expression and admitted almost to herself that she also wanted to be with Senpai all the time. She wondered aloud about the possibility that Takashi had just crashed at Senpai's place for the night. Takashi Suzuki's eyes widened in stunned silence. He immediately denied it with a loud voice, insisting that Senpai would never pull such a nasty prank. The class had turned to listen, and the hooded student kept watching him. Yu asked if he even had solid proof, to which the flustered and somewhat panicked Takashi replied that of course he did, insisting they had kissed all night long. He added that he had even slept in the same bed as Kureha Senpai. This was met with coldly skeptical remarks from the other students, with one asking if he was really talking about Kureha Senpai from Otani Senpai's group. Another said that was pure delusion, while the third commented that the guy had totally gotten played. Ryuta thought with dread that the aura was really scary. Then the teacher told everyone to quiet down and save their chit-chat for after class, to which Takashi replied with a hasty apology. Yu sat silently, with a neutral expression. Afterward, the scene shifted to an exterior view of an apartment building, marking the transition of events. Inside the apartment, Yu had bowed and apologized while Kiryu, his demeanor now calm and composed, said there was no need to say sorry, admitting he was also at fault for making her mad earlier. She then asked tentatively if that meant Kiryu was not mad anymore. Takashi replied simply that he was not, and that he wasn't that heartless. She acknowledged that, before adding that there was something else. Takashi reacted with shock, struggling to accept that it truly was yakiniku. He reminded her that a place like that wasn't just some ordinary barbecue joint, but she brushed it off and told him to hold up. She said it was more than just yummy Nikki. It was a yakiniku and izakaya, and boasted that the booze there was top tier. Takashi at either way, it was still yakiniku, with Yu calmly replying that if she said they slept together, it was no wonder the rumors spread. Just then, a server arrived and apologized for the wait as she served them drinks. She looked at the menu cute and composed, saying he shouldn't complain too much, and added with a smirk that she would let it slide if he treated her to all-you-can-eat. Takashi replied frustrated that all-you-can-eat wasn't even a compromise. She then asked if he was okay with offal and said that if not, she would order something else. He responded that it was fine and said he could eat it. They then raised their mugs and cheered. Yu sipped her drink looking serious and brought up a more personal conversation. Takashi, looking slightly nervous, answered that it had just started and had been fun so far. She made a thinking noise while grilling some meat, then asked about another matter, and he responded confused, thinking, aha, oh crap, that book. Didn't she figure it out right away? She reminded him about the dirty magazine again, saying that was why she told him to just leave it there on purpose. He replied that he didn't remember it was left that far. Yu then made a playful but semi-serious expression, saying that if anything happened, she would at least listen, but she expected a fair return for her trust. He smiled, thinking that talking to her felt like talking to one of the guys. Then he was shown with bare feet, saying, Kureha Senpai. She sat blushing, still sulking, while gripping her drink. She told him to cheer up already, her expression annoyed yet caring. Takashi knelt apologizing, saying there was a reason, but Senpai, that a boyfriend who snuck off to eat yakiniku with some girl was not someone she knew, stating that he even drank alcohol too. Takashi reacted with a nervous, huh, as she exhaled a humph. She again indignantly asked if he had drunk with another girl besides her. Takashi thought how she had figured it out from just one glass. Takashi, wondering how she could forgive him, sat before Senpai with a tense face. He respectfully asked her what he could do to make things right. Senpai said she had decided, stood up, pointed at Takashi, and declared he would spend the day repenting his sins. She said she wouldn't kiss him until he sobered up, stunning him, who replied in shock. Kureha, blushing and angry, scolded him with her chest puffed out, insisting that she knew he wasn't someone who hated kissing. Takashi, still visibly upset and sweating, thought he couldn't believe that Kureha Senpai, who was always pushing for kisses, would say such things. In desperation, he knelt on the floor, bowing deeply and apologizing, begging her to forgive him. He pleaded that a whole day of punishment was just too much, but she coldly said no, telling him to reflect properly. Anxiously, he thought that he had never expected Kureha Senpai to get this mad. All he did was get dragged there and have one drink, he told himself. He wondered if super harsh punishment was coming. She brought her glass to her lips, her expression softening with a faint hint of embarrassment. As she drank, she looked at him with a gentle yet wistful gaze, reminding him that he was her boyfriend, after all. She told him he'd better realize that, okay? With those words, he blushed, and she seemed to tense and smiled. Takashi quietly turned his face downward and said, Senpai. Then the boy turned his face toward her. She slipped onto Takashi-kun's lap and nestled close. Takashi-kun thought it might be going a bit too far and wondered if it was some sort of punishment. When he tried to protest, Senpai asked if he thought he had any right to refuse. He quickly replied that it was nothing. Senpai then told Takashi-kun, with a flirty smile, that even if he begged for it, there would be no kiss for him and that he should enjoy being calm while he could. Takashi-kun thought to himself that Senpai was definitely enjoying it way too much. Senpai then asked what would happen next. If it wasn't a kiss, she wondered aloud what else it could be. She suggested, teasingly, that maybe they could try something from the naughty book Takashi-kun had read the other day. He tried to keep his composure, blushing, but with a faint smile, saying it was fine, and insisting he could handle that much. Inwardly, he thought that if anything, it felt like a reward. Then he asked Senpai if she was okay with it. Senpai, smiling mischievously, said she wondered how long he would keep calling it a reward. She took his hand and said they should start with something light, guiding his hand toward her chest, saying they should warm things up with that. Takashi's face, red with panic, shouted as she pushed his hand under her shirt, and did so with a sly smile. He stammered, saying Senpai, while noting that his hand was there. Senpai, showing a teasing expression, pulled her shirt to expose more of her cleavage, and pressed his wrist between her front curves, asking if he liked it. With a seductive face and a blush, Senpai had her hand near her lips and said, "When your wrist gets wrapped up like this by my twins." Senpai thought he had seen scenes like this in books before, but never imagined it would actually happen to him. Red-faced, he nervously agreed, and she called him a good boy, saying she liked that. He tensed up even more, stunned by her actions. Then the girl, still on his lap, grabbed a can and said she would go with that one next. As she opened the can, Senpai turned to her, his face pale and stunned. Senpai then tipped the can and let some of the drink pour down her chest and hand in a suggestive manner. His face suddenly showed a wide-eyed reaction as she stared down at the liquid running over her chest and tightening her grip on her shirt. His mind was in chaos, wondering what on earth this was. She lifted her hand to her lips and licked the drink from her fingers. Blushing and looking both intoxicated and mischievous, Senpai continued to lick her finger while holding the can. Takashi's mind screamed in disbelief. He felt completely dazed, blushing and sweating. Everything seemed to freeze for a moment. Kureha, blushing with closed eyes, licked her own finger, making a moaning sound, and he felt like his brain was going to melt. Overwhelmed and aroused, he clenched his teeth and wondered what was happening, telling himself that he was so happy it felt like his brain would melt. Teary-eyed, he asked her if this was really part of the punishment. Takashi, his voice tense, said he really meant it, reminding her that this punishment was supposed to make him suffer. Senpai, stammering with a red face, replied, I want to do it. She paused, then asked, "Wanna do it?" Blushing and closing her eyes, she thought to herself that honestly, she was just enjoying this. She placed the hand that had been holding the boy's finger in front of her mouth. There was a soft smooch. Senpai kept sucking on the boy's finger, letting out a gentle sound. Takashi had a blushing face and was breathing heavily, while Senpai, blushing with her eyes half closed, soon took his finger out of her mouth and let out a relaxed exhale. Still blushing and sweating, he muttered a soft moan while she made a satisfied face. Kureha thought perhaps it hadn't been exciting enough. Takashi, nervous and flustered, tense up even more. He said, "Senpai," and quickly asked that this seriously wasn't part of the punishment. Senpai responded by saying she would just pour him more, to which Takashi thought to himself, wondering how things had escalated to this point. Senpai with a blushing face said, "Siakasi-kun, you're not holding back at all." He repeated, holding back, with a stunned face. She laughed and said that even kissing was forbidden, bringing her face close to Takashi's and making him quiver. He thought in a state of sheer panic that this was nothing less than a lifetime of torture. Blushing and panting, he inwardly admitted that the truth was he wanted to kiss Senpai so much. He clenched his fist and confessed even silently that he really just wanted to push her down right then. Now on her back on the bed, her face showed both surprise and embarrassment, but her eyes gleamed with curiosity. Inside, Takashi Suzuki wondered she really wanted to see his panicked face. He stuttered, trying to say something when she called out to him. She asked him what was wrong, noting that he seriously looked like he was struggling. Takashi explained that he just kind of needed to go to the bathroom. With a coy expression, Takashi Suzuki repeated his words, saying she understood, and asked if he was going to the bathroom. She kept smirking and teasing, but Kureha asked, with a thoughtful look, if he was really just going to the bathroom. Takashi blushed and said, Takashi Suzuki tried to evade it, asking what Kureha Otani meant by that. He said he did drink a lot. She admitted that was probably part of it. But the girl said the real point was, even if it was just a hunch, as his girlfriend, she had a woman's intuition. While sitting confidently with a playful smile, she said he really wanted to let it all out. Right then, Takashi Suzuki's face transformed in shock as he tried to defend himself, stuttering, That's. Takashi then asked what would happen if he said he wanted to let it out. Kureha remarked that he seemed flustered all of a sudden and asked if he really wanted to let it out. Takashi, blushing and looking away, insisted that he didn't. He then said with a serious face that he felt like he was dying. Kureha, maintaining her composure, reminded him that he was being punished. Takashi Suzuki, clutching his chest and saying his heart hurt, looked defeated and on the verge of tears. Kureha Otani responded with a dramatic sigh, asking what she should do if her boyfriend kept going drinking with other girls. She repeated her question, asking why he had a complicated expression. Then, after a second of silence, she faced him with her own serious expression. She then reminded him that he was still being punished for ignoring his cute girlfriend and their lovey-dovey time and finishing things on his own. She turned to Takashi with a troubled expression, her face slightly flushed, and asked in a trembling voice whether he really meant his words. She seemed sad, making Takashi realize that he was hurting her with his actions. He noticed that her eyes looked especially lonely, making him feel even more guilty. He admitted to himself that he hadn't been considerate toward her feelings. He firmly resolved not to say anything further for now, keeping his word as he clenched his fist. With a determined face, he accepted the punishment that was due, reminding himself that it was the result of making his girl sad. He declared he wouldn't run away until she was satisfied. She accepted his words and said she would take him up on her offer, matching his earlier courage and saying they should keep feeling the pain until the end. Abruptly, she smiled brightly, raising her hands in a playful gesture, and said that was what she wanted to say, so she'd let the punishment end there. Takashi, stunned and confused, repeated, "Huh?" She smiled with a blush and told him that his serious face had kind of satisfied her. She declared that the punishment was officially over, and from now on, she just wanted to flirt like usual. Takashi, in chibi form, thought how scary she was. He then asked hesitantly if that meant she had forgiven him, and she replied that you could say that. Takashi, overwhelmed with relief, muttered thank goodness and promised he would never make her sad again. He told him that next time, she wouldn't go easy on him. Suddenly, she stomped the ground, saying that if he ever had to eat with someone again, he must contact her first. Otherwise, his next punishment would be way harsher than this, she warned him, pressing the point. With a nervous face, he bowed and said, "Yes, ma'am." She told him to go ahead and use the bathroom, since he had been holding it in, hadn't he? She then thought to herself that there was no way she could ever hate Kureha Otani. Kureha was alone in her room, hugging her knees on the couch and feeling that she had perhaps done something a little mean that day. Tears had eventually spilled down his face as she apologized to Takashi, saying she just wanted him to understand her side a little more. Squeezing the pillow tightly, she admitted, even if only to herself, that seeing him next to another girl had made her chest tighten painfully, laying bare the depth of her feelings. Lying on the sofa with her back to the room, she wondered if Otani wasn't mad, thinking that more than he realized. She laughed gently. She thought that she just couldn't win against him, and repeated that to herself, that she couldn't win against Takashi.